All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Winterviews. This is Series 5, Episode 2. We're in our second of back-to-back episodes right now. We had Amanda Headley on last night, and tonight we have the amazing, the wonderful Chris Panatier on. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you
How
for
you doing?
having me. Thanks for having me. We had so much fun at what was it, Spooktastic, hanging out.
Yes.
So that was a lot of fun. And when you asked me to come on here, I was like, "Yeah, we can hang out more." It's so awesome. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah, Spooktastic was my favorite show of last year.
Mhm.
For those of you who don't know, it's a show that runs in Massachusetts. Last year it was in Framingham. This year it will be in just outside of Boston or in Boston. It's run by Alyssa Alessi, who is another horror author, middle grade horror author who's amazing and awesome. And we will see her later on down the road on this season of
Oh, cool.
interviews. So everybody just, you know, keep that on your tabs for later. Um, but for tonight's program, we are going to talk about not necessarily a genre, but a literary device, which when you pitched this idea, I was so excited about. Although I did have to ask you what it was because I was a little dumb. And then once I understood, I realized that that is like one of my favorite kinds of stories. We're going to be talking about nesting narratives, the idea of a story within a story. But before we get into that, for those unfortunate people who do not know who you are, would you mind just taking a few minutes and giving people an idea of who you are and what you write?
Sure. Well, I'm just so lucky to be able to write books and short stories and stuff in this genre, which I love so much. And that's what I do. Currently have 4 books out. They are The Phlebotomist, Stringers, The Redemption of Morgan Bright, and Shit Show. And then I've got a 5th coming out from Rapture Publishing on February 26th. It's the opening day of AuthorCon in Virginia. That one is a horror fantasy, which is just bonkers. And that one's coming out from Rapture, which is mostly known for doing chapbooks, but this is their first novel. And I already worked with Mitch Hull, who runs and owns Rapture, doing the art for all of his chapbooks. And so it was just sort of a natural pairing. I had this book, he asked to see it, and he really loved it. So he wanted to publish it. And then my next trade publication after that is called Worry Box. And that comes out in September. I've probably pitched that book 20 different ways, and I think I'm settling on it's sort of The Haunting of Hill House, except that Eleanor is a 11-year-old girl with intrusive thoughts. So
Okay.
that's the new way I'm pitching it.
Cool.
But it's a lot of things. So yeah, and I also do I do freelance art. I do a lot of album covers and I do book covers, and then, like I said, the art for Rapture and Daytide is going to be filled with my illustrations. So pretty much art and writing.
Yeah. Illustrations are really amazing. Seen a lot of your book covers over the last few months. And this edition of Daytide is a hardcover limited edition. Is it going to be coming out in like a paperback form at any point, or ebook, or is it just going to be?
Well, so for now, it's just the limited edition. It will get We do know it's getting an audiobook release.
Sweet.
So
Cool.
it will get an audiobook, but we're doing the limited hardcover first, and that's so that they can get them all sold and all of that stuff.
Yep.
And it's sort of a different, honestly, I don't think there's a ton of crossover between buyers, collectors who are looking to buy a limited edition hardback and like people who want to buy just trade paperback.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I mean, I'm not Philip Fracassi, but hopefully we can sort of get some momentum with it and perhaps get a trade deal out of it. So kind of like with Boys in the Valley that Philip Fracassi did, it came out as a limited edition from Earthling, I think, and then ended up getting him a 2-book tour deal. So that's kind of like the absolute dream scenario would be to, enough people like it, are buzzing about it, and that happens. But I'm not nearly as precious about where my books go and what happens to them as maybe I was when I was starting out. I'm kind of like, I'm always going to have ideas. I'm always going to have books being written. I write way more than I can publish. So I just keep writing. And if the right home comes along for a book, like I had written Shit Show I'd been sitting on for about a year. I'd submitted it 1 or 2 places. Famously, Christoph Paul at Clash was like, "This is too crazy for us." And we also have a novel coming out about a guy who shits snakes. And he was like, "There's just too much crossover there." I'm like, "Well, no one shits anything but shit in my book." So Sobolo took it, and they're brand new, but they're great. And Shit Show has done like fantastic for coming from such a small press that's kind of like just getting its feet under it. And I've got another one on sub, and I'm like writing another thing now. So I'm kind of like, I kind of am of the belief that if you're in the community and you get to know people, these opportunities will come along. And the books that you have on your shelf, either you have shopped them and they didn't find a home, or you haven't shopped them yet, they'll find a home for the most part if you just sort of stay engaged. I just kind of believe that, and maybe that's a little bit of magical thinking, but that's the way I do it.
No, it's very positive thinking, which I think is hard to come by right now, just in general. But it is this thought that like all of these stories that you have, there are people who are going to connect with them. There are people that are going to find something in them that they can resonate with. And it might take some time, which is hard for a lot of us to really like stomach. It's the query trenches are rough. They're once you do find somebody who is willing to go to bat for you, then you have a little bit more, you've at least got another person on your team, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
But it's it's all about just being patient and letting things roll, and then still keeping the writing going while you're shopping things around.
Yeah. And, I mean, I have to sometimes remind myself that, hey, I actually like writing, right? Because I get caught up in the like profile side of it. And like, am I getting to all the places I need to get to? And I'm not getting the deals these people are getting, or right. And, because you can't help but look around. And I do actually believe this, that the more you celebrate the wins of other writers, the better you will feel. And I truly believe that. I didn't always think that. I think when I was starting out, I was like, but what about me? And I have matured in that way. And I think that probably is similar with a lot of writers. I think you kind of get to that point and you realize it's not like some competition, and that anybody who gets a deal is a major win, especially as, you know, publishing struggles and reading is going down and all of this. Like the more we can put out there that will get people engaged to read, the better. So I'm just like, I'm here to be a cheerleader, frankly.
Yep, me too. It's
Yeah.
you've always got to celebrate your friends, celebrate your fellow writers. It's not always about you. So
Yeah.
you know,
At the end of the day, you can sit down and write and you can create. And if that's all you do, that's magical. That's the most fun I have as a writer, when I'm actually creating something and going, oh, I didn't see this connection. I just made this connection and this was so cool and so magical. That's the best part.
Yep, I totally agree. This program, though, is about you. So
Okay.
I am
Oops.
going to just take a moment and say that for those of you who have not looked at Daytide, have not seen what this thing looks like, or have not heard any of the buzz surrounding it, it looks fucking gorgeous. And absolutely, if you can, you should try to get one of those limited edition copies if that is your thing. And you want to make sure that you support a small press and get all of those cool art pieces that Chris has done in the book. You should do it. Are you going to have copies at AuthorCon?
Yes, we're gonna have them there. They're at the printer right now. Like Mitch and I went through like stages and stages of making sure everything was done. I mean, we've each read that book 1,000 times. I hope I never have to read it again. As great as I think it is, I basically have it memorized. Yeah, so it's at the printer now, and we're hoping to get the proofs for the cover here soon and stuff, but it's going to be really cool. It's like fabric bound with foil stamping on it and everything. It's going to be so pretty. It has end papers. It has a map. It's a type of map like you've never seen. It's not your typical like squiggly line, here's the land. It's totally different. I'm just so excited about it. And apparently I don't know a lot about the sort of limited edition, deluxe edition, they call them, world, but Daytide is $65, and that's a lot of money. But if you go to Barnes and Noble, or you go to a bookstore and you buy 2 hardbacks, that's $65.
Yep.
Like, and yeah, they're great, but they cost over $30 now. And this one, and I got to mention, it's got a introduction by Philip Fracassi. That is like amazing. When I read this thing, I was like, are you sure you're talking about me? Like, it's so good and it's so heartwarming and it's lovely. And that's a guy who definitely celebrates other people's wins. And, so this thing is like fancy, bells and whistles, fancy. So you can go buy 2 unsigned, unillustrated, hardbacks from Barnes and Noble, and if that's your jam, do it. Or you could buy 1 Daytide.
Yeah. If you are, for viewers, if you are in and around Williamsburg, Virginia, at the end of February, it'll be February 27th through March 1st. AuthorCon is a book convention that runs yearly. It is a charity. It's for the charity Scares That Care. So a lot of the donations there, a lot of the what authors spend to table there goes to this charity. So it's all for a good cause. and you get to meet some really awesome authors like Chris, like Amanda, who was on last night, and I will also be there. And I believe your publisher will also be there.
That's right. That's right. Rapture will be there. So Mitch will be there, and he's a total golden retriever. He's the sweetest person and so enthusiastic. Literally a golden retriever. You could throw a tennis ball for Mitch and he would go fetch it. And I can only say that because it's actually true. But yeah, Mitch will be there, and so I'm sure he'll have a bunch of his chapbooks, and he'll have Daytide as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That'll be very cool. So getting into our topic of discussion, talking about nesting narratives in horror specifically, but we can also talk about outside of horror. Sure. I like to try and find inspiration in every kind of literature. I think that when it really hit for me what you were talking about, the first thing that popped into my head was The Neverending Story.
Oh, yes. Yes.
As totally. Not horror, but certainly has some horror elements to it. And so I sort of went down this wormhole of looking up all of these books with nesting narratives.
Oh, cool.
But to start the subject, I want to talk about nesting narratives in terms of character development. How can a writer use the stories within stories to enhance the characters and give them further dimension? Is sort of the first question.
Yeah, well, I actually recently read one that is, I think, probably one of the best examples of that. I have been going on Neil McRoberts' podcast called Talking Scared, and he and Nat Cassidy and I have been breaking down the Dark Tower series because I famously am an idiot and had never read any Stephen King except for On Writing before we started this project. So when I confessed my great shame to Neil, he eventually said, "Hey, I'm going to do a deep dive of the entire Dark Tower and all the tie-in books. Do you want to come on as the idiot who has never read Stephen King and you're reading them for the first time?" And I was like, that's my role. I'm happy to do that. So we just recorded The Talisman, but right before that, we did Wizard and Glass. And Wizard and Glass, it's the fourth book of the Dark Tower series. I knew we were eventually going to get Roland's backstory. Roland is the gunslinger. He's kind of the main guy in the series. And this one is, I didn't know it was coming in Wizard of Glass. I had no idea what was coming. And it turns out that they all stop in the middle of the road, and they've been asking Roland to talk about his past, and he decides to do it. And so it's a 1,100 page story or something, or maybe it's 900 pages. And 85% of it is him talking about his one episode from his childhood. And it really illuminates who he is, because up until that point, he's got a sadness about him. He has a resignation about him. He has a sort of, he'll zone out from time to time and just stare off in the distance. And he's detached in some ways and rough around the edges. There's so much you could say about it. And then it tells the story of him when he's 14, and him and his two friends are sent to this place called Hambury. And that's where he falls in love. And that's where tragedy happens. And he grows up, and he grieves for the second time in his life. I would say the second time. The first time was for learning about some truth about his mother, but the second time is over the loss of love. And when you come out of the story within the story, you see him completely differently. That was the first time, because it's interesting that you asked me, how does a nested narrative reflect on character? Because I wasn't even thinking about it from that perspective. I was much more thinking about it from sort of the effect on the story.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, when you do a big flashback, that's to illuminate character more often than not, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's plot in there and there's stuff that happens to propel the story forward. But what you are doing with a flashback is you are illuminating character. And so I think Wizard and Glass is a super, super great, example of that. I think that, let me think if I could think of another one. I think, okay, so I'm gonna actually, Neil's ears must be burning. He wrote a story called Good Boy, which is about a good boy, a little doggy. And the story starts with a man digging a hole to bury his dead dog. And he ends up going inside. This woman invites him inside, and he starts to tell the story about this dog all the way from when he was a little kid. So you kind of are like, wait, this is the same dog from when you were a little kid. And that is a heartbreaking story. And even though it's so good, and everyone should read Good Boy. It's a novella. You can read it in one sitting. It's already on the Stoker long list for novella. And that bastard wrote this in like 3 weeks. And I'm so jealous. It's so good. I knew it would be good because Neil's a super smart, thoughtful, heartful guy who's read way more than I'll ever read. But when I read it, I was like, you son of a bitch, because it's way better than it deserves to be. But it's fantastic. And yes, that has a plot, kind of, but it's much more to illuminate character. That whole flashback is the story, but it illuminates the character. And then when you surface out of the flashback, out of the nested story, you see the main character who is telling it again in a totally different light. And it's such a neat device to do that. So those are two examples I would give for how it illuminates character, that just off the top of my head.
The interesting one, like I have heard, first of all, I have heard that Neil's story is absolutely heartbreaking. And it is, it's gotten a lot of like thumbs ups. I have not read it yet because I am sure that I will cry a lot, but that is totally my thing. I love books that make me cry, so eventually I will get to it. As far as the Stephen King Dark Tower series goes, because that is such a humongous series, I'm interested in how that book maintains the ongoing plot while also spending the majority of the book deep diving. And then I guess this is more of a plot question versus a character question. Only because it's a huge series. So did you find at any point that you were kind of missing what was going on in the current story at all, or were you just sort of like locked in, knew that this was an essential part of understanding how the rest of the journey was going to go? I'm just curious, as another person who has not read any Stephen King.
There you go. See, it's okay. It's okay.
I would like to know. That's
yeah. So that's a great question, and that's a natural question to ask, I think, because you're in a much bigger story. And so, boy, I mean, if someone says, hey, let's stop off here for 900 pages
Yeah.
and tell another story, are you here for that? Like, you're like, are you really, like, as the reader, don't you want to just continue on the story you've been on? And I will say that, and we made this point in that podcast, that, first of all, most people, it seems like, um, believe that Wizard and Glass is the best Dark Tower novel, and I'm sure there will be people who disagree with that, but we all had it as number one, and I wasn't bothered one bit by the side quest. One reason was that it is, my personal opinion is, it is the best piece of writing that I have read so far of Stephen King. That includes, that's the first 4 Dark Tower books. That includes Salem's Lot, Talisman, and The Stand, which I've now read all of those. And that middle section of Wizard and Glass is the best thing I've read of his. And I think because I am somewhat, if I feel that someone is meandering, they can lose me a little bit. And there is admittedly some meandering in the Dark Tower. I mean, there can't not be. These are massive books, and King does meander some. And that's not my favorite style. Some people are like here for wherever it goes, and I'm kind of like, let's stay on task, okay? And so that nested narrative in Wizard and Glass, he did it for a very specific purpose. He wanted to communicate why Roland is the way he is. And so he told a very tight story. It's the tightest story that he's told that I have read. And it's really good. And everything is there for a reason. At the same time, there are clearly things that he has dropped in that you're going to see again. And you know are going to be important even outside that nested story. So you are getting that, and it does illuminate a lot of what has already happened. It does some explaining as you're reading the story that happened a long time ago. You, the reader, are learning more about why things happened that you saw happen, and that. So actually, it didn't bother me at all that we were diverted from the chief storyline, because I was enjoying it so much. It was that good. It was startlingly good. I wasn't expecting it to hit that hard, coming from sort of the path I was on. I was enjoying the books. I was enjoying the stories. But they had, to that point, just been sort of an interesting story to me. This was really good. So when we came out of it, and I even said on that episode, a few things happened on the framework, the bookends of that book, that when we came out of the story, I was like kind of pissed, because I was like, oh, now he's just screwing around again. He's screwing around, and it feels like he's dishonoring this brilliant story he just told, and he's just going back to playing around. So I absolutely loved that centerpiece.
Nice. Okay. In comparison, when you get a book that is as small as Good Boy, or another one that I just thought of, Helpmeet, which has a nested narrative in it, those rely on such precise language to be able to give you all of that same emotion that you got from something that is 900 pages to 1,000 pages long. And I have to say that I'm always so enamored with people who can do that in such a short number of pages. did you, just as far as comparing those two, did you notice one way or another what the difference was, I guess,
Yeah.
between the two?
Well, King isn't, I would say, King isn't going, oh, I have to be super judicious with my words here. He does a lot of explaining. Like he will hit the narrator of his stories will sometimes be like, and this was just like the thing that happened before that you will remember happened, and that's just sometimes he'll give you that, maybe if he thinks you've forgotten or whatever. The way that Neil writes, I've read one short story of his and then I read Good Boy. And the way that Neil writes is it's kind of an expert hand already, despite the fact that he hasn't written a whole lot. And what he does, which is something I learned, which he very clearly already knows, is that building character, I think the most potent way to build character is through gestures a character might make. And I'm not talking about shrugging, I'm talking about a action they might take, a small, seemingly insignificant action they might take. And I can't remember exactly offhand examples from Good Boy, but it was the way that the character moved about and the way the character's own actions were not wasted. So everything the character was doing had a purpose. And so you knew that when the character did something that was kind or helpful or whatever, it stuck with you. And I think that little gestures that you don't editorialize on hit the hardest. Because if you have a character do something that is a nice gesture to somebody, and then you point to it and you go, like the time you did that nice thing, it totally loses its effect. I have tried to get better at doing that. In my book Shit Show, the main character is caring for his mother who's suffering from dementia. And he's kind of an old Gen Xer and he has long hair and he's kind of an old metalhead. And he wears scrunchies in his hair. He just like quickly puts his hair up.
Yep.
And he's always putting his mom's hair up in scrunchies. And no one says anything. They might be having dialogue and he might be asking her how the eggs are, but he's putting a scrunchie in her hair. And to me, that is 4 words. And it says more about him, the relationship he has with his mother, than a full paragraph detailing how much they love each other.
Yeah.
So things like that, and Good Boy has that, more than probably Wizard and Glass. I'm not saying Wizard and Glass doesn't have that, but it didn't stand out to me for that reason. Although the book, there's so much in the book, I'm sure there's many examples of that. But I always applaud a little bit when I read something that an author has written and someone does something with someone else or for someone else or in anticipation of another's needs. That, and I think that's probably the best way to characterize it. That really hits and people remember that. So those to me are just fantastic examples of character building through what I would call a gesture.
Yeah, I really like that. That's something that I will definitely be looking out for more when I read from now on, because it's the idea of trying to master the tightly written narrative while also adding layers is something that storytellers have been trying to master for a long time. So,
Yes, indeed, indeed.
um, I did want to also ask you how you applied this towards Daytide, since want to talk about your work as well.
I was thinking about whether or not Daytide is a nested narrative. There is a small nested narrative within. No, there's one or two that I would say are sort of. There's one or two chapters that are character development flashback chapters that
Okay.
are there to answer a mystery, to answer a question that I have put in the reader's mind since page one, that the flashback answers. Because
Okay.
I like I'm sort of like, I think every book, no matter what it is, should have a mystery. It doesn't have to be a big mystery. It can be little questions that the reader has in their mind that you've asked for them, that they want answers to. And that to me is how you propel a book forward, is not just the story is unfolding in front of me. I actually think you have to be a much more skilled storyteller to keep the reader engaged in a story that is one direction, just linear. Here it is unfolding in front of you. That to me is tough to do. I think it is easier to write a propulsive story if you set it up with a question. You set it up with a mystery. Why is this happening? Why did this person do this? Hell, Shit Show has a nested narrative too about the villain. You get the villain's backstory through a nested narrative.
Okay.
But those are more, those are more flashbacks. Even the Redemption of Morgan Bright has a story in a story. I mean, it opens with a witness in a police station telling the story of what happened. So that one actually is a nested narrative, I suppose, in the more traditional sense. When I think the first time I really started thinking about nested narratives was probably House of Leaves, which admittedly I've read 25% of, and ain't nobody got time for that. It's just like too much.
That's a lot.
And if you can finish House of Leaves, man, props. I have not been able to, but what I did read, I really enjoyed, and it actually did terrify me. And I was trying to figure out why. Why did that story in its nested form, why was that more scary to me than if we were just getting the core story just told to us? And another example that I've been thinking about recently is The Fisherman by John Langan. That one is pure nested narrative, two guys telling a story in a diner, and then coming out of it, and the stories kind of relating to each other. That one's a classic nested narrative. But I was trying to think about why in horror can a nested narrative be effective? And I think the reason is twofold. One, it's literally a layer. You are going one layer deeper in the story. There's the story that you're being told on the surface of the person who is receiving the story or telling it to somebody else. And then there's the second listener. And I think that the reason it's effective is that when a character is being told the story, we then are sitting in the room with that character who is hearing the story. We are now in the story. And so you are sitting there, you've got the audience in the book who's hearing the story, and you're hearing it too. So you are effectively in the book. And so that whatever the audience in the book is hearing, of this nested narrative, of this secondary story. So are you. And the stakes for the audience in the story are now your stakes. And so I think that's why it can be especially effective in horror, because you're trying to, maybe no one will ever do it as well as perhaps a movie can do it. A movie has a lot more tools to affect the viewer. But the one tool that a movie doesn't have, that a book does, is the active involvement of the reader's imagination to create the image.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a movie, it's passive. Listening is not. Listening is active too, because you have to marry what you're hearing with your mind, and that creates the image. But viewing does the work for you. And so if you can, with a nested narrative, get the reader deep enough to where they consider themselves part of the story, and it's tough, right? But you try to get them deeper and deeper.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get them sitting there as the audience, and House of Leaves does this really well for the portion I read. House of Leaves does this really well, where I was going, wait, I've been reading news articles about this, this thing that happened in this videotape. But wait, that's all not real. When I shut the book, none of that happened. And so it's hyper effective. And that was the first time I had really experienced that. And so I think the two things that you have with a book are, you have nothing happens unless you have a reader and their mind creating the image based on the scaffolding of the words from the author. And when your mind is actively working and doing that work, you are not sitting there going, I am reading a book. You are in it. And if you could do one more thing for the reader by actually making them an audience with the characters in the book, then I think that you can hold them there longer and make things that happen in the story hit harder for the reader.
Yeah.
It certainly takes a deft hand. I mean, the book I'm working on right now, I am doing that. It is a nested narrative, and I am having to just turn dials constantly to get it. So it's almost like it is a balancing act, to where, like, what are those balance board things, right? There's like a log in the middle, and there's
right? They're balance boards.
It's like that. It's like that, and I'm adjusting the sides, and I don't want the reader to fall off. And and it's frustrating and it's hard, but I tend to just go, maybe I can do it. And so I'm trying to do that. And if I can do that, I think this new one can be pretty interesting, and maybe pretty compelling. So yeah, that's a long answer. I hope I hit some of it.
No, it's a great answer. It actually made me think about something that I saw on Threads the other day, which kind of frustrated me a little bit. But that is Threads. And the idea that as an author, you had to make sure that the reader knew exactly what the conflict was for the character in the book, like what their drive was. And I do not think that is entirely true, especially when you are trying to create layers of layers within the narrative, but also like you're trying to make sure that there is some level of surprise with your reader, but also with your frame narrative as to what's happening in the story that's within the story. And it just, like, it strikes me because it's somebody who's, trying to tell you what the right thing is when there really shouldn't be a right thing.
Oh yeah.
But I thought about it because I had tried to do something like that in a book that I wrote 2 years ago, where I really did not want people to know what was going on with a character. I wanted to be more thoughtful with the language so that you were still you were understanding what was going on, but when things really did hit, they could go, oh my God, that has been there this whole time.
Yeah.
And now that I'm like going back, I can see where this is, how this has been progressing.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult, but it can be done. And
yeah,
it does take a lot of nuance and a lot of time. And it's awesome that you are doing that in your latest work in progress. And when I initially, when I sent you these questions, I was assuming that Daytide had a nested narrative, and that's
sorry.
I wanted to talk about it. So I apologize for just assuming that it did.
No.
So that's why there were.
Oh, that's okay. No, I was
this in Daytide.
Well, it's the reason I brought it up is because I'm doing it on this one I'm writing now for. It's the book that I have to give Angry Robot for 2027. And so I'm writing that now because it's due in September. So now I'm like completely in that mode. Yeah, sorry if you thought that, but
no, that's cool.
It's okay because Daytide has a little bit of it, and several of my books, as it turns out, do. But this is the first one. This one that I'm working on now is the first one where it is purposefully set up like that. It is a nested narrative. I want the reader to be in the room with the characters. And I am trying to, turn those dials and get that balance right. But to your point about the thing you saw on Threads, like, talk about a balancing act, right? Because your characters have to have motives, whether or not you disclose those to the reader. And when you disclose those is a different question. And so your characters have to have motives, and then you have to go, well, shoot, do I give the reader some breadcrumbs to know either what this character's motives are, or that a wink that, yeah, you don't have it yet, you're going to get it. And is that another character saying, why the fuck are you doing this? What's going on with you? Whatever. So that's a heck of a balancing act. But yeah, it's also interesting. It's also really cool to explore.
We've talked about it a little bit, certainly with the Dark Tower, but in terms of world building, because that is pulling the reader deeper into another story that's set within another story. It's entreating the reader to another view of the world that they think they know a lot of the time. You're introduced to these characters in the Dark Tower. You're introduced to Roland, and you have a concept of who he is without actually knowing anything about him until you read Wizard of Glass. Same for Neil's story. You start with two characters sitting down to talk. The question is, how do you use the embedded narrative to make the world in your novel richer? And that could be the world in the frame. It's about the world that's in the frame story. But if those two are the same world, I guess, what are the differences if you've got two different worlds and if you've got the same world in both stories?
So that's a great question. And, there is let's go back to the never ending story. So that is the simplest frame narrative. That's the simplest one you can do. That is, kid reads book, movie is book. At some point, the kid plays a small role, show's over. Okay. So it's kid getting book, right? The For me, the frame, the whatever, the covers of the book which we are presenting to the reader within the story, they still have to be engaging. So it's not just a hey guys, here's a guy in a room, he's going to tell the story, and okay, sure, and he tells the story, and maybe the story is interesting, maybe it's not, but then when you come out of the story, you have to be able to answer the question, why did you have us watch a guy tell a story instead of just telling us the story, right? Why did you put a story in a story if the story inside the story doesn't touch the larger story, the frame story, right? So two examples, I think, of that did a pretty cool job of that, even though the frames were smaller. There wasn't a lot, it wasn't like The Dark Tower where it's 7 books or whatever. But one of my favorite horror novels of all times, and frankly one of the scariest I've ever read, is The Woman in Black by Susan Hill. The Woman in Black scared the crap out of me, and it was written in 1981, but it feels way older than that. And that starts with a grandfather at Christmas, and they're just all hanging around. It's this nice, warm, cozy house, and they're hanging out, and it's like at Christmas, and they're like, "Hey, tell us the story about whatever." And I forget what the frame was, and he tells the story, and it's this terrible, terrible, scary, horrifying story where his wife and his kid end up dying. Spoilers, guys, if you haven't read the Woman in Black, but you should still read it because who cares about those spoilers? The rest of it is just terrifying. And it does edify you about him when you come out of the frame, but it's not like in fact you kind of forget it's a nested narrative. The central story is so compelling. The one that I think did it in a very cool way is a book I just read recently. It's another, I would call it a novella. It's The Black Spider. And it is from 1861 or something. It's mid 1800s, written by a priest under a pseudonym. And the pseudonym is, I wrote it down, Jeremiah Gotthelf. He's Swiss. Okay. And The Black Spider is it's crazy. It has one of the grossest scenes I've read in anything. So gross. And it's also kind of hilarious in how gross it is. But it's a christening party. So there's going to be a christening, and there's a big meal, and there's a big feast and all of this. And Grandpa starts telling a story, because everyone eats and they get really full, and they're like, okay, we'll tell a story and then we'll come back and eat more, or it'll be rude. So he's like, okay, I'll tell you the story. You're aware that in the house they're in, there is a beam that's holding up a wall, and it doesn't match any of the other beams. And he tells this whole story. And of course, there is a black spider, which is sort of in the story, it's a sort of little minion of the devil. Okay. Because back then it was all devils. But this spider is my hero. This spider is so cool. It reminds me, if I could tell you the role this spider plays, it is the eyeball alien from Alien Earth.
Yes.
I don't know if you've watched it.
All right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so this spider is the eyeball alien.
Excellent.
So if you love her, you'll love The Black Spider. But anyway, So the story goes, when we come out of the nested narrative, we understand why that beam is important. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Okay.
Even though the overall story is sort of written as a a parable or something to kind of beat you into submission and be a good Christian. But it's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome. But I think that you want, at some point, you want the nested narrative to catch up to the present and them to intersect. That to me is where it's the most engaging. And the only reason I'm going to use my own book again as an example is because I very intentionally did that. And that is The Redemption of Morgan Bright, where this character named Charlotte is telling us what happened at this asylum, and things are still happening. And as she's telling the story, what has happened starts to catch up with the story she's telling, and they collide.
Gotcha.
And that to me is it gives the framing narrative weight. It gives it stakes. It has to have stakes, because if it's just somebody telling a story and then, shutting the book, and you go, okay, well, I'm glad we got to watch you experience the story. Unless it really affects them, then why did we do it? Right. Yeah. And another great example, and I think Paul Tremblay's horror movie is, I would call that a nested narrative too. Well, it is. Frankly, it is. It's a survivor of this event telling us the story, but not only is it telling us the story, but we're also reading sections of the the screenplay for the movie that they were making in this high school. And so not only is it a nested narrative, and they do collide, which is great. So you're getting the story, and then the story that he is telling catches up with us at the end. I think that those types of narrative devices are extremely effective, and it's extremely effective in horror story. You learn more. So to go back to your original point, you learn more about your narrator as the story is unfolding and we're hearing the story. And then at the end, you go, oh, okay, I understand who you are now. And then you get that classic Paul Tremblay ambiguity as well, with how much is the story the true story versus how much is what's written in the screenplay the true story. So that's another really good example of it, I think.
So do you think that for that kind of story, you need to kind of start in media res, like in the middle of the story, to really make that mesh well?
Yeah. So that's really interesting, because you need someone to sit down and start telling the story. And so your frame, right? You need the person who is going to hear the story.
Yeah.
You need to show them, in whatever way they're going to experience the story, we have to be along for the ride with that person to be the audience alongside the story they're going to hear. So it's tougher to start in media res when you have a frame there. And so that presents a different challenge for the writer, which is to make the framing narrative compelling. And frankly, oh my God, and how can I forget The Princess Bride? The huge nested narrative, where truly, as much as I love The Princess Bride, the frame is completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
Completely unnecessary. You don't need grandpa reading his grandson the story at all. It adds a little comedy relief, and it's even worse in the book. The book for everybody, I'll shout it to the hills. Skip the first 100 pages, where the author it's the ultimate nested narrative. It's a triple nested narrative, and the first two frames are super stupid. It's a writer who is a misogynistic piece of shit and hates his son and calls him fat, but wants to get him this book that he read as a kid. And literally, this is supposed to be a kid's book. And the author is talking about how he's at a writing convention. He's on the phone with his agent, and he's like looking at the woman in the pool, and he's thinking about wanting to cheat with her on his wife. And you're like, this isn't the Princess Bride. What the fuck are you talking about? And so it felt very self-indulgent. And so I'm just going to say, like, I will, mark it down, put me up against any fans of The Princess Bride. The framing narrative for The Princess Bride is totally stupid and unnecessary, as much as I like the movie. But it's got to be compelling. And frankly, even in The Woman in Black, with Granddad sitting down to tell the story, it did touch on once the story was told, you learned more about him, but then the story's over.
Yeah.
He didn't make any more decisions. He wasn't put to a choice. What I like is when a story, the nested narrative, again, catches up to us in the present, and our person who is telling the story or the people who are hearing it are put to a choice and they are challenged as characters.
Yeah.
If they're not, and they're just listening and they go, thanks so much, and grandpa leaves the room and you go to bed, okay, like, it's cute, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't do a whole lot for me. I haven't read Buffalo Hunter Hunter, but that's a nested narrative. I'm very excited to read that. I have it right back there on my shelf by Stephen Graham Jones. Mm-hmm. That one is, about there's this, my understanding is there's this preacher or a priest, and this fella keeps showing up to his church. And that is the narrator of the nested narrative. Eventually he tells him his story, and it's pretty wild. So I'm really looking forward to that one. But I also realized any found footage story or movie is a nested narrative, right?
Yeah. Oh, I was actually just thinking of Archive 81.
I haven't seen
that. Not a movie. It actually starts as a podcast,
cool.
which they adapted into a TV show, but it is a ride. It is so good. As far as the nested narrative style story goes.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm wondering, like, I think, so two examples of where the nested narrative catches up to the audience and thereby the reader, or even if it's a movie, so you've got the Blair Witch Project, which I loved. And the Blair Witch Project is just pure found footage, but it's not a nested narrative. You're just watching the found videos. Whereas the Ring is, there's the nested narrative, which I would say is the video. Yeah. And then there's the viewers. And then there's like you, the viewer, you're like, oh shit, I'm a viewer too. Am I dead now? Is she gonna crawl out of my TV? And that's what you want to do. And so if you're writing horror and you want to scare your reader, you want to try to scare your reader, I think you have to attempt to put them there in the living room with the other people watching the girl crawl out of their TV, right? And make them think twice. So, I mean, like in this one I'm writing now, I'm trying to create scenarios that I know readers are going to experience in their everyday life, and set those up as, hey, if this happens, like, that's probably not good for you.
Okay. Interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
We are over.
Oh, sorry.
A little bit, but no. Do not apologize. This is awesome. I usually try to keep these to an hour, but honestly, I have so much fun talking about some of these subjects that it can just go on, and that is fine. I did want to talk about, we have talked about nesting narratives in terms of plot, because that is kind of what you think about first with a nesting narrative. Often characters are given information that helps them look at the events currently unfolding in a new light or gives them perspective, or it could be misleading them. And when I thought of that, I was thinking of The Usual Suspects.
Oh my God.
First,
I was thinking it as you were saying that. I was like, oh my God,
yeah.
why haven't I talked about The Usual Suspects?
One of my absolute favorite films of all time. It just, I love the use of spinning a yarn for a purpose that
Yes,
the reader doesn't, or the watcher doesn't know until it is revealed.
And that's such a great example, Kat, because what happens? He is killing time, right?
Yep.
Until he can get out of there. He's telling the story, it has a purpose, and we see the story catch up with the narrator when he's walking out of there and the fax machine is coming through with the crime drawing, right, of that's clearly him, but he's gotten out. Yes, so what a great example. Oh my God, so good.
Yep. Ugh. Yeah, I thought of that one. And then the other thought of, and I really liked how this misled readers, was in The Last House on Needless Street.
Oh yeah.
Catriona Ward has a character searching for their sister. Absolutely, like, takes you out. You were not expecting this, what's going on with this character at all. And there's definitely some misleading stuff going on in the narrative as a whole, but also with this character.
Oh, that's a top 5 book for me of all time. Like, that's one of my absolute favorites. That one is, I mean, I don't even know. That's a nested narrative tied in a knot, that story. That story is outrageous.
Yeah, it's good. It's well done.
The cat POV, I mean, come on.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. I know a lot of people who stopped reading it when they got to the cat POV, and it's such a shame.
It's such a shame.
It's this blanket, like, I don't like talking animals, and then they, toss the book across the couch, and it's just like, just give it a chance.
Yeah.
Just like not everything is what you think it is. Just please keep reading.
And that's one of those things about, like, if you spoon feed the reader, you write boring books. Sorry. If you give them something that is engaging, you risk them stopping reading. But fine, at the end of the day, I want to write interesting stuff. And if I don't think Kat Ward is like struggling for readers, but I'm so glad she wrote what she wrote, because it was hyper original, hyper engaging, so smart, and that book has stuck with me for years.
Yep.
Rather than writing something that maybe was easy to understand, but people forget about it.
Yeah. No, it was definitely it's definitely one of the most different books that I've read, and it stayed with me. And then at the same time, totally, you were talking about the totally straightforward. It's really hard to keep people engaged in just telling events as they go along. I'm currently listening to the audiobook of The Changeling by
I have
Victor
it right there.
Wall.
I have to read that. Yeah.
It is so good. And the audiobook is narrated by him.
Oh wow.
And I feel like that's like the coup de grace of experiences when you can hear the book directly from the author. For telling it play by play as it's going, it's a beautiful book.
Oh, that's so cool. That's awesome. Yep, I've got that one sitting back there. I have to read it.
the wrap-up questions
Okay,
as
sure.
we jump into it. We've talked a lot about examples of nested narratives. Are there any others that are your favorites out there that we have not talked about?
That's a great question. There's one more that I was going to bring up, and it's another top 5 book for me of all time. And only today did I go, wait, was that a nested narrative? And it is. It's Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer.
Oh yeah,
It's
is.
It's journals.
It is.
You're reading her journals. And so I was like, what? I can't believe it. And then I believe, because I read these so long ago, but I believe that in the second book, you actually see them discovering the journals, I think. But
I haven't read the rest of them.
Look, the first one is the best one by far. It's not even close. But and I haven't read the fourth one. I don't know that I ever will, just because I loved the experience of the first 3 so much, and you wait that long to write a fourth one. I just don't know.
Well, there's supposed to be a 5th too. I think he's writing a 5th.
Oh God. I'm trying to get through Ambergris, that trilogy, which I really have been enjoying, and it also has a nest. Okay, I just have to say this. So Ambergris is 3 novels, because it's a big fat thing when you put all 3 together. I think it's called like City of Saints and Madman, Shriek, and Finch. And City of Saints and Madman is fantastic, but there is a nesting device used in that is so audacious and such a giant middle finger to the reader. You have to like golf clap it. It's so funny. So Ambergris is a town or a city state, basically, where there are humans and mushroom people. And halfway through City of Saints and Madmen, you get to the visitor's guide for Ambergris. And it is like, I want to say 60 or 70 pages, and it's a visitor's guide. And even bigger middle finger is that it is footnoted to the hilt. So like each page is this big, this much is footnotes.
Oh my God.
So the top of the page is like maybe a couple sentences, and then the rest is footnotes. And the third middle finger is that footnote number 2 says, basically the effect is, it says, don't skip the footnotes. All the best shit is in the footnotes. And when I read that, I wasn't going to read the footnotes. I wasn't going to read them. But then when I read that, I was like, okay, fine. And I did. Mm-hmm. And it's the best part of the novel. The visitor's guide and the footnotes, the story in the footnotes. So that's a triple nested thing.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. The story in the footnotes is a blast. So yeah, so I have to mention that one.
That's awesome. I haven't read any of his stuff other than Annihilation, mm-hmm. but I have wanted to, so
yeah,
I will have to add them.
Born is pretty good too, but it's not a nested narrative.
Okay.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Born.
Yeah, I've been meaning to read the rest of the series that mm-hmm. goes along with Annihilation. I've got a couple of the books actually right here, and I have not gotten to them yet. So someday.
There'll never be enough time.
Yeah. No.
It's just
that's for sure. So my second question you've already answered, which was how many, basically, was this the first time that you had used a nested narrative? And that is not true, because you have used it in previous works. And then the other question was, is it something that you wanted to experiment more with future work, and you're currently doing that?
Yeah, in a big way. Like I had to, you talk about setting up the framing narrative. I started this current one that I'm writing right now. I probably have 6 or 7 different starts. I had to,
Hmm.
I had like 6 or 7 different entry points where I was like, is this the right way to enter? Is this? And then it took me that many times to just find the right entry into the story.
Yeah.
But I think I did. So that's
Yeah.
the fun
I get that.
discovery part. Yeah.
Um, you reminded me that I tried to start writing a nested narrative years ago. And I came to the conclusion that I was not I was not at a good enough point of my writing career to actually write it. Because it just I needed time to let it breathe. So it's been
Yeah.
sitting for years. But it's very inspired by House of Leaves.
Okay.
Um, and Archive 81. So who knows? Someday maybe I'll get back to it.
Hmm.
But it was lots of fun to work on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, you really are working with a lot of tools, and you are pulling a lot of different levers and turning dials to get a story like that to work. And believe me, I mean, there's some stories that I've thought, okay, I want to do this, but I don't think I have the tools in the toolbox yet. You know,
yeah,
that
yeah,
happens.
yeah. And it's fine to, put something down and be like, I'll be back for you. As long as
Exactly.
well, even if you don't come back to it, you know, you're always telling other stories, so it's okay. But
Yes. Yes.
um my last question.
Okay.
Where can people find more about you and your work?
Well, I like to say that I'm very easy to find because I'm an attention whore. And and so my website is chrispanatier.com. There's links to everything on there. I'm on Instagram at Chris Panatier. I'm on Blue Sky at Scribe of Hades. And I just canceled TikTok, so I'm not on TikTok anymore. But those are the places you could find me, and I'm on Threads talking shit to MAGA people. So if you need a
Threads.
dose of that, I'm on there doing it.
Yep, I feel like Threads is definitely the place to get into it with
Yes.
people the easiest.
Uh-huh. But my wife tells me I need a break from Threads. She's like you have to give yourself a break. And I'm like, you're right, but
Yeah,
I admit my addiction.
it's there is something about it that's very like I can put something there that I know people will actually see versus some of the other places, but
Yeah,
then that's not always a good thing. So
yeah.
it's you sort of have to like regulate how much uh how how much you put on there, or at least be in the right state of mind uh when you do go on there.
I heard a great piece of advice from one of my friends. He's a great writer too, Tyler Jones, and Tyler said he will go on social media, but just to post stuff. He doesn't scroll. And
Yeah,
I'm like, you're a better man than I am, man. If I could keep from scrolling, then I'd be doing great.
it's what's hard about it is that you're not necessarily scrolling just to scroll. You are there to see what your fellow writers are
Right.
doing and fellow and readers, and to engage with them, because if you
Hmm.
don't, you feel like, it's part of the community piece.
Right. Right.
You are wanting to give as much as you get. And I struggle with that too. Like
Right.
I know that I could just post my stuff and then um I could go away. But then I feel like I'm not engaging.
It's finding that
So
balance. I agree with you totally because if someone is kind enough to say, hey, I read your book and I liked it, or leave a review of my book, I want to make sure I see that and
Yeah.
interact with that, so I hear you. It's a struggle to find that balance without, making yourself just miserable.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's where the timing apps might come into play, where,
Yeah.
your phone you've got it set so that you can only be on a certain app for however long.
Hmm.
I usually end up overriding those things when I set them, but I do think that it's a new year. Maybe I'll try and work that into the overall equation. So,
Yeah.
well, that does it for our discussion on nesting narratives and everything in between. I want to thank you for coming on and talking about this. This was so much fun.
Oh, I had a great time. Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to it, and you're a real bright light in this community. I love seeing what you're doing. You're always doing something, and so thanks for doing this and for having me.
That's really sweet. Thank you. I
Yeah.
this is like the one thing that I feel like I can do um that feels like it is helpful with indie authors, not just for exposure, but also for people watching if they do want to get ideas, if they want to, build community, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I do enjoy doing this every year.
I love it. It's
Um,
super cool.
and thanks for being a part of it. It's cool.
Thanks for letting me be a part of it. I really enjoyed it.
And thank you all for joining in and watching. If you missed any of our other episodes, previous seasons, everything is available on the YouTube channel, which is at Catherine Silva Author. You should definitely go and check out more of Chris's work. Daytide is coming out towards the end of February, I believe 26, 27.
Yep, the 26th, I think we're going to try to do.
So you should definitely check that out and be on the lookout for Worry Box, which will be coming in the fall. Next week on Thursday, we will have Renee DeCamillis here. She is my fellow main author, and we're going to be talking all about supernatural horror, which is a really fun subject. So make sure that you are here Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for that. Until then, everybody stay safe and warm, and or if you're in a warm climate, cool, and have a good night or morning, depending on where you are.